Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 2 of Journey to Freedom. And if you have not watched our first episode, Journey to Freedom is a video series that focuses on the African diaspora. We're going to journey through our ancestry results and the results of other people. And we're going to talk to people who are at the top of their fields as it relates to ancestry. And so I have my sister here, Yael Gordon. I am so excited. I've been wanting to have her as a part of Journey to Freedom from the beginning. I knew I wanted to interview her. So Yael, I know who you are and I know all about you, but tell everyone else a little about yourself and what you do.
Yes, absolutely. Well, my name is Yael Gordon, by Yaya, of course. I am a historian and a genealogist, and I am from Louisiana. So I specialize in enslaved history, plantation history, antebellum history, all the 1800s. And I work on plantations doing historical research for these different locations and foundations. And I also specialize in tracing family histories, also tracing histories or families for those who may be adopted or have lost parents and not familiar with their information or they're familiar with their family background. So my genre is it's very wide. So, but I especially love deep South history. And so that is one of the reasons why I got started with dealing with a lot of plantation history. I've been fascinated with it since a kid. And so I am the Black girl who works on plantations. And sometimes I get a little bit of looks, but in order for us to know our history, know our research, we have to be able to control the narrative at all times. And so I wholeheartedly promote that at all times. I'm also a PhD candidate in higher education. Got my bachelor's in history, Southern University, in A&M College at Baton Rouge, and I got my master's in museum studies at Southern University in New Orleans, and I'm finishing up my PhD program at Jackson State University.
I'm not going to give you too much grief about going to Jackson State. You know, about that as a Southern grad, but I do have a lot of friends who are in their PhD program or who are upcoming to graduate. So congratulations on being a candidate. Yes. The struggle is real. I'm right there with you. So first I want to open up by talking about my ancestry results. So 2 years ago, I completed the ancestry DNA test, and the good thing about ancestry, I think, is that it updates its results. So as more and more data comes in from different people who are doing the test, it updates the results. And so when I first started, majority of my DNA was from a certain region, but now it's starting to, really identify the regions that I am, according to my DNA, I am from. So I want to show you that, and I want to get your thoughts. I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
And prior to doing this, I never would have thought, I never actually considered where slaves were taken from. And so, when I look at my ethnicity as estimate, if you can see it, 29% is from Nigeria, 24% is from Cameroon, Congo, Western Bantu peoples, 18% from Mali, 8% from Benin and Togo, 6% from Senegal, 5% from Ivory Coast, Ghana, and 5% from Europe, 2% Norway, which I was really like, what? Norway. 1% France and Ireland, and 1% Indigenous Americas. And so is it a question that you encounter commonly in your work, like knowing where slaves were taken from, or hey, can you track, your ancestry all the way back to Africa? Is that something that you encounter a lot?
Yes, I encounter that question very, very often. Every genealogist who deals with African American history or African diaspora deals with that question on a constant basis. And I will say definitively, yes, it is possible. Will it always be possible to locate that information? Not necessarily. Mm-hmm. Number one, you have to take into context the locations that it is showing. So you mentioned one important factor, that as more people take these tests, the more information you'll be able to get. Now there are some who are actually not as excited about the changing of their ethnicity estimates. But you have to remember, it's an estimate. And yes, as more people do take the test, the more information you'll be able to gather. However, you have to remember that some of these areas that are what they're considered now was not what they were considered back then.
True, yeah.
And I'll say, for example, my great grandmother, now she was born in the, say, 1890s. However, she'd always known that her family, even though they were some of them were enslaved persons, they come from Guinea. Now we're thinking, of course, oh, okay, this is Guinea in Africa. But realistically, we realize, wait, that's not Guinea what it is currently. Guinea that was currently existing now was not founded until way, way later with the namesake. She meant Guinea as in Africa. That was a term that was being used for Africa. In some places, they're on the Gulf of Guinea. And so you have to, again, keep into context the locations that some of these people might have migrated and went to different areas. Some of these groups may have collaborated together and intermarried. So you might have DNA from different groups, and it may seem like it's more prominent for one group, depending upon how DNA, it's dispersed within a person's genes.
Right. True.
Now, there are definitely some individuals who I have met that have been able to trace their ancestors to Africa. They have been able to trace them on a boat directly from here, or from any state, really. Now, again, it's not always really easy because there are so many different factors that go into that. You have name changes, you have selling of individuals, mothers, babies, children, fathers. Many times, and a lot goes on in our community. We have so much endogamy going on that everyone is kind of related to each other. And so trying to go back far enough to figure out, well, who is who and where do they come from is really, really hard. So it's more easier to find them within the US or even find them in the Caribbean areas as opposed to going directly back to Africa sometimes. But there are individuals who do specialize in that. There are a few DNA kits, the few DNA tests that say that they can provide, say, an African tribe or a group that one is connected to. But you have to keep into context the number of people that they're pooling, the number of people that's in their data pool. But when looking at your results, actually have a cousin of mine, Alicia J, and she specializes in genetics. And so she does a program that can help locate an African relative. And so that kind of helps individuals find where their ancestors may have come from. And so so the program and database that she's created, it helps with matters like that. So not many can look into DNA results. They may have 10,000, 15,000 matches, but however, looking through them and trying to figure out, okay, well, you would not find many people that say, okay, they found a relative match that is 100% from Africa.
Right.
And not from here. So with programs like the ones that she's doing, it makes it a little bit easier to kind of help trace where that person may be connected and where they left Africa and came over here and what areas they were in before they came here.
That is so interesting. Like I would love that. And I think that's something that I struggle with. And I think just African Americans in general are going to struggle with. Like, just we want to have some type of cultural awareness, and it's not that, like, a lot of times I'll see people, not necessarily African specifically, but it's kind of like a sentiment that, okay, y'all not really African, so, don't wear the African garb or, but at the same time, like, I do believe that there should be like some sort of like reality that we are trying to appreciate.
Right.
We're trying to have an appreciation for African culture, and we're trying to connect in a way that it may, never be possible for us to truly connect the way that we want, unless we all just up and move.
Correct. And I get it. But I've heard that conversation comes up so much. And even with me being in higher ed, I've talked to a lot of international students, and I'm always having conversations with them, about that cultural connection. and even friends of mine that are from Africa, having that conversation. And sometimes the conversation gets a little bit heavy. We're talking about cultural appropriation, things like that. Are Black people really culturally appropriating African culture? But there really are many of us who want to know where we came from. And realistically, we have to remember we didn't ask to come here. We were brought here.
Right.
So we didn't have a choice in the matter. We didn't migrate here later on. We didn't immigrate here. So my ancestors were forced here. And so any histories that I may have had, they're lost to no one's to no one's of of my ancestors' faults, unless we're talking about the ones that actually participated in the slave trade.
Right.
Even those who may have been in Africa that participated in the slave trade. No one is exempt, but we all have to be able to have an open conversation to say, okay, well, let's get back to helping each other make that connection and build that bridge, because that's what it's really all about. We should want to learn more, and those who are not from here should be able to say, okay, well, we're going to be a little bit more empathetic about what's going on. As to American slave. There are so many individuals who I follow now on say Instagram, and we've connected in there. They're from Africa. They live in Africa. So our time zones are crazy when we're trying to talk. And a lot of American slavery, they didn't know about. I'm sending slave ads. I'm sending different information about rebellions and lynchings, and they didn't know a lot of the things that were going on. But at the same time, they're sending me stuff that was going on where in their own history. And so I think that's really the beauty of it, is being able to trade that information and find a common ground.
Yeah, and I think that's something that as a Black person, and of course it all is determined by where you live, but I think, I think American education system doesn't do a great job of educating on the occurrences of other places. So like as I'm an adult, like learning about the rebellions in Haiti, learning about the rebellions in the Caribbean, learning about the history. When I sat down with my friend Tolson, he is in episode 3 of Journey to Freedom, and he was kind of talking about their history, like how we learn about the Civil War and how we learn about the different world wars and their own history. And there's so many aspects of it that we're just so unaware of. And so I think ultimately it's just about connecting and wanting to be connected. And so I'm going to share my screen one more time to show you something that I thought was interesting, was the fact that they identify these different communities, right?
Yes.
So, I'm from southeast Louisiana, so Lafayette, Opelousas area. And so it identifies with East Central Louisiana Acadians.
Mm-hmm.
So, I always never really like identified with like Cajun, kind of like Acadiana culture. I was a part of it, but I thought like, oh, that's for like super light-skinned people, like not really just everybody who lives in this area. But you can see it says your possible ancestors. Alfred Davis, who is my ancestor, I want to say that he was my great grandmother's dad. And so my great grandmother was Hannah Davis. And so I do like the fact that it tells these like stories about, these different individuals, like Anderson Savoy, that is my grandmother's father. And so it tells all these stories about, and even like different spellings. So like Savoy was a kind of Creole name. Also Savoy, which is like kind of, I don't want to say the white version of this, but most of the people that I knew from that area growing up that were Savoys, Savoie, were white, and then the Savoys were Black. And so just kind of, and it showed you like people you could be related to and things like that. Right. So yeah, just showing how specific. And then it talks about the South Carolina African Americans is saying, you and members of this community are linked through shared ancestors in South Carolina. So how is that like, it was really spot on because most of my family's from Lafayette, this area, right? So what was the significance of South Carolina? Because I actually had never heard of, or I never thought of like South Carolina being a place that maybe my ancestors were from. but
Gotcha.
I guess it kind of makes sense. So,
Yes.
so yeah.
So I'll put it like this. Okay, now scroll that screen over just to the left just a little bit. Just
Yes.
okay. So narrow it out a little bit. Well, minimize it just a little bit so I can show you the waterways. So you see right under there, that's Georgia, that's Savannah, right?
Yes.
So you look, a lot of these people these were slave trade ports. Okay.
Mm.
Savannah, Charleston, South Carolina. They would be bringing people in and out to sell them. And they were selling them out. They were bringing them in from Africa. They would be selling them out from the ports. They would be selling them into the ports. If you look at some of the ship manifests, you will see the travels of many of the ships that would have come and gone from these particular areas that would have, say, left Charleston, South Carolina and went down to New Orleans. And they were selling people in and out. Now, one thing that I like to point out about South Carolina, number one, Charleston was probably one of the largest slave trade ports in the world at that time. Okay. They had a lot of travel going in and out. So it is very likely that, say, someone may have been brought over from Africa and they may have been in South Carolina for a little while. They may have had a child. That child may have stayed there and they moved on, or their child could have been sold down the river. Because one of the things that in Louisiana, it's a whole different culture and lifestyle by itself, including with American slavery. Louisiana was the only place that actually had a law that protected so-called protected children, that said children under a certain age could not be sold away from their mothers. And so no one else really cared. But did everyone sell children? Not all the time, because a child is still money. A human body, a Black person, no matter what it was, babies, adults, elderly, they're still money. It's just a matter of their value. Now, early on, right before the Louisiana Purchase, South Carolina banned. Well, they made it against the law for slavery sales, like importation and exportation. One of the reasons was people had been hearing the rumblings of the rebellion in Haiti. So a lot of government officials, a lot of owners, they were very, very fearful as to what could happen. No one ever really wanted to talk about it because that made them seem weak. No one wants to talk about it and say, okay, well, hey, these slaves, these people rebelled and they overpowered and they killed a whole bunch of slave owners, which is really how a lot of slave owners came to Louisiana. So many of them fled to come after the Haitian rebellion. However, they were coming off the brink of that, and so they were like they didn't want the issues. They didn't want the trouble. However, the same gentleman who put that law into effect, he went right behind it when the Louisiana Purchase happened and reversed it. So now they can do trading and selling whatever they wanted. Now, there was still an importation ban put in place. That was put in 1807, but it went into effect 1808. And so there was a ban on importation for enslaved people from Africa to the U.S. and Africa to the West Indies. They were not legally supposed to be bringing any more in, but many people were smuggling in. In Louisiana, that happened a lot. One of my ancestors was part of the smuggling business, because it was a business. And so South Carolina also knew that people were still getting smuggled in and out. And so it was just a free flow after the Louisiana Purchase, because Louisiana Purchase almost doubled the size of the American territory.
Right.
So that's more, lands and more areas. And with the amount of slaves individuals had, and I will say, you'll hear me use the term slave and enslaved very interchangeably. I know that there has been a lot of political correctness conversations about that, of not using the term slaves because it dehumanizes individuals. However, I'm using it from a historian's perspective. Yeah. And in order to accurately conduct research, you need to know what to look for. Right. And words such as a slave or even Negro, you're going to have to be able to know those terms are there. It's not any way of diminishing that person's humanness. So that is my reasoning. But it was a free flow after that. And so again, Charleston, South Carolina was one of probably the largest, slave trade ports at that time. And so it was very easy to bring them in, bring them out because they're right there on the waterway, bringing ships in and out. And so it's very, very easy for them to be selling some. Now, every person that came from South Carolina that was enslaved did not necessarily go by boat. Some of these people had to walk to different locations.
Jeez.
And some of these people weren't necessarily brought in for the purpose of bringing them into South Carolina to sell automatically or bring into New Orleans. Some of them were sent down here by punishment. If you ever heard the phrase "sold down the river," that is a term of people of selling individuals down deep south. That is a place that no one wanted to come to because the climate, the diseases, the harshness of the work was extreme. It's anybody knows anything about South Louisiana, you know that you're not going to find much cotton. You're going to find a lot of sugar cane, and that was probably one of the most brutal types of work that an individual would have had to do.
And I never the same connection because when I was down south, funniest thing, this is how you know I'm really from down south, because I remember being in first grade and we had a show and tell day. What did I bring? Sugar cane. Why did I bring sugar cane? Like, well, I remember bringing this
yes.
for show and tell. But up here, I live, in North Louisiana now, and there are a lot of cotton fields.
Cotton, yes. Cotton is king. Yes. Cotton is king and sugar is white gold. That's what it is. And so it was a very, very expensive crop. The turnover rate was very high because a lot of deaths, a lot of accidents. There's more mosquitoes down here. Because a lot of moisture here. Cotton doesn't grow too well in the deep south, but sugarcane flourishes. It's a Caribbean crop. And that's one of the reasons why those in Haiti, they started to rebel. I mean, it's a very harsh type of work. Yes. And among other things, they were not getting food.
You're doing it for free.
Yes, doing it for free. And they're getting, maybe foods, not even enough foods, but not enough clothing. And so it's very harsh. And so they knew that market. And so since the turnover rate was very high for enslaved persons who worked, say, in the very, very deep south on sugarcane plantations, they would always be in need of people. They will always be in need of enslaved persons. So they typically bought more enslaved persons than what they actually needed because they knew they would not be surviving long. So that just shows you just how massive the slave trade was within the states, the interstate trafficking, because they always needed people, and most people would be needed down south. I know we consider South Carolina and Maryland, Virginia, all parts of the South, but to me, Louisiana is the South.
Louisiana is the South. I mean, deep South is just a different, even like the mixture of cultures. And that's kind of the next question I wanted to go into, because I did see like the identification of Creole on the ancestry, which again, I have this like warped kind of idea about Creole because I grew up with this idea that I did always know that Creole meant like a mix of some kind, almost like mulatto, but like I never thought that I would have people in my lineage that would be Creole. Or considered Creole. Like I just always felt like, okay, I'm Black, my parents are Black, I just didn't think about that. So what would be your definition of Creole?
Well, the actual definition of Creole. So let's pick that apart. From what we know or what we've been told to what it actually is. Okay. What most people think it is someone like looks like Beyonce. Someone that may carry the surname of Richard or Guillory or Matwire. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for the straight hair.
You're giving me like all the Opelousas people.
Right. All the Opelousas people. Look, everybody in Grand Coteau, everybody in Lafayette, and so you're looking for the light complexion, the certain type of hair. And so, or someone who is mixed race, or someone who may have been on record identified as a mulatto,
right,
or quadroon or octoroon, or especially the one I love, someone from New Orleans. And that is not the case.
It's not. But
it's not the case.
but it just that's the difference between someone who like has heard, like
Yes,
about what Creole is and people that have actually like encountered people that's Creole. Because
correct.
there was someone, there's actually a girl that's, I think she's mixed and that comes to our church, and she said that sometimes people would not know that she's Black, and I'm like, when I look at certain people, and it maybe it's because I have been around Creole people, and even if they are like, they can be
Yeah.
like, I'm like, this girl's Black. Sometimes
We're from Louisiana. We can look at people
yes, I can
and
look at
tell. Let me tell you something, and I'm not even going to call any names, but I remember this one time that the Washington Post contacted me regarding a certain person on a nice high platform because I had found some documents about this person's ancestry, and they were slave records. And those of us who know, we never, it's never been something definitive to say, okay, this person has acknowledged they're Black. No, they're living in a white world. They're white. However, somebody's mama is like, look at that person's hair. Look at their features. They're Black.
They're Black.
And it's true.
Exactly.
And it's true.
You can,
okay.
I don't even know. And I don't try to, like die on that hill, but even me and my husband, because it's funny because I can tell that I have grown up around Creole people and he has not, because he's from North Louisiana. Even I keep telling him that North Louisiana is South Arkansas. That's what it is.
That's what it is. Sorry.
Sorry. And so, because you can tell there's a different level, there's a different culture in the South, there's a different type of history. And so I can look at someone that people will be identifying as white. Oh, this is a white girl. I have another friend who's mixed, and he's very, very light skinned, and he's grown up with his white family. And he said, sometimes that people will say certain things around him and thinking that he's white, and I told him, I was like, I would have never thought that. Every time I see you as, and it's not even a negative thing. It's just like, I've been around too many Creole people in my life. But anyway, so you say, I get what you're saying. So what is Creole in actuality?
Creole. So the original form of Creole meant someone born in the colony, someone born in Louisiana.
Okay.
That's the base line of it, okay? So you have French Creole, you have German Creoles, you have Cajuns who are Creoles, but not Creoles who will be Cajun.
So what is a Cajun?
So Cajuns, as you saw in your own DNA, Acadians.
People from Acadia. Like
yes, they were. Yes, so about 3,000 or so were exiled to Louisiana in the late 1700s. And so you have Louisiana, Cajun, and Creole. So a Cajun can be a Creole. And when I say that, is because, say, for instance, someone's parent was born in Germany. However, their child was born here. That person, their child, they would be a German Creole.
Right, but the mama would not be.
Correct. They just be German. Or so you hear a lot of French Creole. And they were the aristocrats of Louisiana society. I mean, they didn't really deal with Americans. So Creole has nothing to do with a complexion, a hue, someone's hair, someone's necessarily, I can't even say, well, nowadays surname, because names have changed so often.
Yeah.
Or even someone who speaks French. It is someone who definitely has, say, French heritage, Spanish heritage. They may have some German heritage just as well.
Right.
Native American, African. So if a lot of the documents that I look at for enslaved persons, when the people were listing the people that they owned, they would list Creole on there. That didn't mean that person was mulatto. They would literally identify who was mulatto and who was not. They'd also identify who was American. That means that person was not born here in this territory. They were born outside of Louisiana and brought here. So it's nothing. Creole has no color. It is a heritage. It's an ethnicity, and so it is a mixture of so many different facets. Everybody from Louisiana is not Creole. Just because someone's last name is Jones does not mean that they're not Creole. Just because someone's family is not from...
I mean, information, because my family name is Jones, and I definitely did not think that we are Creole by any...
Right, and so it's so much. And just because someone is not from Cane River does not mean that they are not Creole, because you hear all the time, Cane River Creoles. Yes, a lot of us do have ancestors who were Cane River. I myself, but a majority of my other Creole relatives, ancestors, came from Catahoula, Rapides, LaSalle, Iberville Parish, and Grand Coteau. And so it's a lot of different people. So there's no color in that. So you'll hear something like a Black Creole. No, it's not a Black Creole. You're Creole.
You're just Creole. Yeah.
You're Creole. So
that's amazing.
And I'll say this, I'm trying to say it as politely as possible. Once you had a lot of, say, mixed race persons or fair-skinned persons or even Black persons early on identifying, now they're carrying the Creole, identification. Number one, we didn't ask for that. That was the designation that was put on us. Mm-hmm. And so when we're identifying people, but then you had a lot of white people who were Creole started to disassociate themselves with being Creole, because nobody wants to associate themselves with the caste system of the people that are at the bottom, right?
Because it was kind of like, okay, white, mulatto, Creole, Black folks.
Right, and so
you don't want to bring yourself down.
Right, and so even with the Creoles, even Louisiana French Creoles, it's you look at a lot of these old plantation records. There are a lot of French Creoles, and they were the plantation owners. They were white people. So it was a term that was put on to those who were born here. That's what it was. And so there is no color designation for that at all. That is a misconception. Yes.
Like, as I said, mind blown as a person who's from Louisiana. I'm like, what?
Now I will say that yes, within certain communities, we can tell who, I hate to say this, but a little bit more defined Creole that has stayed within their families, or even say mixed race persons.
Some people would intermarry.
Correct. And everybody intermarry.
That has been a thing. Like, I've heard that people from certain areas intermarry. Like,
people do that today, and they don't want to admit it. They don't know.
I've heard that. Like, to keep.
They don't know. When I mentioned endogamy, that is where people in small communities intermarry with each other. So now you're not double cousins, maybe triple cousins. And a father and a son may have married two sisters, and now they got their kids. The kids coming along. And so everybody, I'll tell you, everybody in Louisiana is related at some point. You may not can find them on a DNA test right now, but I promise you, somewhere or another, everybody is interrelated some kind of way. Everybody that normally originated from here. But people back then did marry their first cousins. That happened. You keep the money and the wealth in the family. Mm-hmm. You also keep certain features within a family. So that's why I say that, yes, there are some communities, some Cajun and Creole communities that have a distinct look, because they're marrying those who look like themselves. So when we look at things like melanin, Black people come in so many different shades and colors and different characteristics and different attributes. But my mom always said, you get what you mate with. Reproduction is mating. That's what you're doing. That's what everyone is doing. We are, and we're going to have what the features of whomever we choose. And so you get certain features that go for the long haul.
Yeah, for sure.
Some wash out, some absolutely don't. I've seen Creole people that, like, my brother is very dark skinned, but he has straight hair. Yeah. And so it's so many different people, but there are, as you can see from your own results, there are Black people who are both Cajun and Creole. I'm both. If you look at a lot of what was going on at the time, there were a lot of individuals who were plantation owners and some who were not, that were having children by these enslaved women.
Yeah, for sure.
Some of these enslaved women, you know, had children by some of these men. These plantations, they were very, very close in proximity, most of them in this lands. And so it was easy it's easy access. So there are some who have a lot of different variations. We even have Portuguese variations. So so someone to look at their DNA results and find the Louisiana Creoles in there, that is very special. A friend of mine, Gina, cousin, she actually contacted Ancestry to get that project started, which is amazing because, as she says, we have over 600 years plus of heritage here. It is a distinct community that not everybody can say that they are a part of. And if it's there, then that, when you know, you know. So yeah. It's a culture, it's a heritage, it's a language, it's our food.
Like I can embrace my Creole side, and I have I do have some cousins that I know, like, we're very fair skinned, blue eyes, green eyes. Some even came to Southern with me that I knew that we were related and things, and I kind of associated more of their side, like, oh yeah, they might have something in there. But so I have so enjoyed this time. I feel like I'm way more educated about ancestry right now and feel equipped to be doing more research. We're gonna be working on more projects in the future. I'm speaking it.
Yes.
So if someone wanted to get in touch with you, how would they do that in 30 seconds or less?
They can reach me at theancestorkey@gmail.com.
Theancestorkey@gmail.com. Well, I am so thankful that you agreed to do this.
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
This is episode 2. So we will have episode 3 where we talk to my lovely friend, Tosin, who is from Nigeria. He's a Nigerian immigrant, and we're going to be making some jollof. So I'm really excited about that. It's so good. And so we'll see you guys next time.